Hi, welcome back to my solitaire playthrough of Labyrinth. We're entering turn 6. I've dealt a new hand of cards. We, as the US player, get 9 cards this turn, as troop intensity is at low. Meanwhile, the Jihadist AI receives only 7. They're receiving only tight funding. They're on the 2 box of the funding track. We have some lingering events still in play. Abbas in the event box, Abu Sayyaf from the Philippines, Fatah and Bhutto affecting Pakistan. Afghanistan is now a besieged regime. We have a couple of cadre recruits, one in Pakistan, one in Somalia. Some cells scattered about the board, one active in Italy, and prestige is at 7 or high. World and US posture is both at hard. Looking at the victory track, Islamist resources remains at 0. Meanwhile, good resources has reached 6. Fair or good governance countries is at 5. Poor governance or Islamist rule countries is at 7. It looks like we have about one more turn maybe left in the draw pile after this one. I'm hoping to fit this and the next turn both in one video, so I'll go ahead and show the US hand but do quicker updates through the actual turn. Let's take a look at the US hand. We got 5 US associated events, 2 unassociated events, and 2 jihadist associated events. This first card allows us to test Egypt, which is currently unmarked, untested, and to drop jihadist funding by 2 or by 4 if there are no countries under Islamist rule, which is the case. However, jihadist funding is already at 2 in the tight area of the funding track. They're going to have a hard time pulling themselves out of that unless a lot of plots come on the board. So there might be a better use for these 2 ops. This next card is a bit better. Although it is removed after the event is triggered, but it allows us to set Jordan to fair ally. It's currently unmarked, untested as well, and gain a prestige and drop funding by 1. So I'm tempted to use that for the event. This is Libyan deal. The preconditions are not currently being met. We can try to work on meeting those before playing this card, and that would entail conducting a war of ideas a couple of times at least, in Syria or Iraq to shift their alliance to ally. That's quite a lot of work, but the event is pretty nice. It would set Libya to ally, and they're currently an adversary. It would allow us to gain a prestige and to select 2 Schengen countries' posture. It would also block the event Libyan WMD. This is a lingering event that is removed once triggered. This is a 3 ops US associated event that the preconditions are currently being met. There are no Islamist rule countries, and there are no good countries that have cells or plots currently. We would roll US posture, and there's a 50-50 chance of it switching. We would gain 3 prestige. That's quite a lot. It's going to be really helpful when we conduct our war of ideas. And it would allow us to select the posture of 1 non-US country. There are a lot of cards that affect posture of non-US, non-Muslim countries this turn, and posture is one of the harder concepts for me to wrap my head around. I think that I see that it affects what operations the US player can conduct. They can only conduct a regime change operation if they're at hard. They can only conduct a withdraw operation if they're soft. It also influences the effectiveness of the disrupt operation, and depending on the world and US postures, there may be a number of negative die roll modifiers as a penalty during War of Ideas operations. This is another 3 ops US associated event. Its preconditions not being met. Pakistan must be good or fair. It's currently poor, but it would allow us to shift to ally, which it already is. It would allow us to select India's posture, which is here, and it blocks a couple of these events and would allow us to remove a marker if a plot is resolved in India. I'm not sure. I probably will end up using that for the ops points. There are a couple of unassociated events, Danish cartoons, US selects Scandinavia. Scandinavia's posture is currently unmarked. Then jihadists place an available plot 1, or if any Islamist rule, which there currently is none of, any available plot in a non-Islamist rule Muslim country, remove after the event is triggered. We have an Iran card, so now I see that there are at least a couple of these in the deck. As the US player of this card, we would select and test a Shia mixed country, and then remove one cell there, or from Iran. Our two jihadist associated events are Gaza War. US discards a random card, which could be the last card we're holding, which is one that I know I'm not going to play for the event or the ops. I will either try to get it discarded through an event or at the end of the turn. Luckily, we don't have to play every single card in our hand. It would raise funding by 1 and drop prestige by 1. And this one, there are a few of these in the deck, at least a couple. Although you would only play it if a non-Islamist country has a cell. That is pretty unlikely. There's not a lot of cells, only 5 on the board, but they're scattered about, and none of them are in an Islamist rule country. You would replace the cell with any 2 available plot markers. Okay, let's get started. Turn 6. During the first jihadist action phase, they played Al-Anbar, Sunni Resistance Sanctuary, to place a cell in Iraq from the funding track, which means that when we disrupt in Iraq, it only affects 1 cell and not a cadre. It blocks US Bin Laden and Zawahiri, which I think have been played already, and is blocked by Anbar Awakening. It's a lingering event that's removed from the game. Then they traveled 2 cells, one from Central Asia to Afghanistan, and one from Iraq to the Gulf states. During the US action phase, we played this 2 ops Al-Azhar card to deploy 2 troop cubes from Saudi Arabia to the Philippines, and then we played King Abdullah, Hashemite Muslim alternative, for the event to set Jordan to fair, raise our prestige by 1, and drop funding by 1. For the jihadist AI, we resolved Hamas elected Palestinian Islamist option, and we selected and discarded from our US hand martyrdom operation. Our prestige dropped by 1. Funding was already at 1. Then they followed that up with this event, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Kashmir insurgency spawns jihadist, placing a cell in Pakistan and India. India tested and starts out at a hard posture, bringing the world posture to 3 hard. For the US action phase, we played these 2 cards for the ops to remove the sleeper cell from the Gulf states back to the funding track. The jihadist AI played sanctions for the ops to conduct a minor jihad in Afghanistan, which failed. That cell was removed and placed back on the funding track. They followed that up with another US associated event for the ops to travel a cell from Pakistan to Afghanistan. For the US action phase, we played safe for now for the event. We rolled for posture, and luckily we stay at hard. I said earlier world posture was at 3 hard, it should have been at 2. Then we gained 3 prestige and selected 1 non-US country's posture, and we set Eastern Europe to soft, bringing it to hard 1 on the GWOT relations track. Then we played this card for the 3 ops to conduct a war of ideas in Pakistan, and we succeeded in improving governance from poor to fair. For their final card, the jihadist AI played this US associated event that's playable. To ignore the event and plot in the Philippines, they rolled once and failed. And for our final action phase, we played this card for the ops to conduct a war of ideas in Iraq to improve governance from poor to fair, and discarded our final card. Entering turn 7 of our playthrough, the last turn before we reshuffle and enter the second deck of our game. We've drawn 9 cards as the US player, 7 as the Jihadist AI. Here's a look at the victory track. Islamist resources is at 0, good resources is dropped to 5. Poor and Islamist rule countries at 5, fair and good governance countries at 7. Here's a look at our hand, and it's not great. We got special forces, which allows us to remove a cell from a country that has troops or is adjacent to a country with troops. The only troops on the board at the moment are 4 cubes over in the Philippines because of the Abu Sayyaf event. Still trying to figure out how to deal with that. Not much has happened. They do need to roll 1 or a 2 to succeed in a plot there. I'm thinking of either deploying 2 cubes back to Iraq or maybe off of the troop track, because we also have Saddam captured, which would allow us, if it has troops, to place an aid there and gain a prestige. We have this, which would only trigger if the US is at soft posture, which it's not. And I, as you know, have a tendency not to want to do that. But just in case we want to or are forced to do so, that is why I chose to start Eastern Europe as soft last turn. This would allow us to select another card from our hand that has an ops value that's equal to the resources value of an adversary country, to shift that alliance to neutral and place an aid there. This is an unassociated event. If we play it for the event, it would allow us to remove a cell from any Shia mixed country within 3 countries of Lebanon. And then we have all of these jihadist associated events. Loose nuke. Play if Russia has a cell and no CTR marker. This would be one that would not get triggered. Al Jazeera, another one that would not get triggered. Play if Saudi Arabia or an adjacent country has troops. This would not get triggered if we can remember to play it after deploying troops to Iraq. This would allow the jihadist AI to automatically travel 2 cells anywhere. Automatically meaning they wouldn't have to roll to succeed. This would trigger the event play if you can select 2 unmarked Muslim countries, not Iran. And there are a lot of unmarked Muslim countries, so the jihadist AI would be able to place a cell in each or 2 in each if any Islamist rule, of which there are none. That's pretty horrible. Kashmir, this would shift Pakistan 1 box toward adversary. It's currently a fair ally, and to place a cell there as well. And we currently cannot disrupt in Pakistan. For the first jihadist action phase, they played this 3-ops card to conduct an unsuccessful minor jihad in Afghanistan. Then they played this for the event, Uyghur Jihad, East Turkestan Islamic Movement. They tested China, it starts out soft, and they placed a cell there. During the US action phase, we played this 3-ops card. The event wasn't triggered to deploy a troop to Iraq. And then we played Saddam captured for the event and placed an aid marker in Iraq. And our prestige rose from 10 to 11, still very high. The jihadist AI played this 3-ops US associated event to plot unsuccessfully in the Philippines, and then followed that with this event, Martyrdom Operation Skillful Suicide Attack, to replace the cell in Spain with 2 available terror plots. During the US action phase, we played Special Forces, Rangers, and SEALs for the event to remove a cell from Iraq. Then we played Loose Nuke for the ops. The event wasn't triggered to conduct a war of ideas, shifting the alignment from adversary to neutral in Iraq. For the first jihadist card, we played Hariri Killed, Anti-Syrian Car Bombed for the event to test Lebanon, which starts out at poor neutral. We then worsened Syria's governance by 1 level to poor. They followed that with this non-playable US event, which means in this case that they would perform a radicalization operation. They have 2 ops points to spend, the first of which would be spent to automatically place a cell into a random country. So we roll a tan die and a black die in this case. We roll a 5 on tan, a 1 on black. We refer to this chart table thing, and we get roll Schengen. So we roll again, we get a 3, and we get Germany. So we place a cell in Germany, and with the second ops point, we would spend it to automatically travel one cell by flowchart. To a good or fair Muslim country with a cell adjacent to it. Pakistan would be the only option here. That ends the jihadist action phase. During the US action phase, we spent these 2 3-op cards to conduct a back-to-back war of ideas in Iraq to convert it to a good ally. Our good resources is now at 8. This event was triggered. Clean operatives, trained jihadists without known terrorism nexus, automatically traveled 2 cells anywhere. To travel a cell from Pakistan to Afghanistan and another from Italy to Serbia. We tested Serbia, and it's at soft, bringing GWOT relations to 0. For its final card, the jihadist AI used this 2-ops card to conduct a minor jihad in Afghanistan, lowering governance from fair to poor. Finally, for our US action phase, we played this card, this 3-op jihadist associated event, to block a plot marker, block a plot in Spain. It still has 1 remaining. That triggered the event Kashmir, Islamabad aids irredentist militants. That shifted the alignment of Pakistan to neutral from ally and placed a cell there. Then we followed that with this 2-op unassociated event to conduct a war of ideas in Jordan, successfully improving governance there to good. That brought good resources to 9. And our final card is this, which we'll be discarding. During the resolve plot step, we flipped this marker. Spain had a 2 plot. We tested its posture, which remained soft. We tested 2 other Schengen countries' postures, both which were soft, Scandinavia and Benelux. The jihadist funding increased by 2, bringing them to 3, still in the tight area of the funding track. After the end of turn cleanup phase, jihadist funding goes down by 1 to 2, and we're entering our second deck. Here's the victory track after the first deck. Our good resources is up at 9, which is what we would need to win a 1-deck standard game. It would need to be at least at 6. So we're looking pretty good so far, but that doesn't mean that we'll make it through all 3 decks. Let's see what happens in turn 8 in the next video.